Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. My name is Jenna Labor, and I'll be your host as we explore this dynamic world of Don Keenan's trial philosophy, The Cutting Edge. Those of you joining us live this afternoon have the opportunity to ask questions and interact exclusively with our speaker. If you have a question, please type it into the comments section below the video, and we'll be sure to address it. If you're unable to spend a live hour with us today, episodes are released each week following the live broadcast. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the alerts icon so you don't miss an episode. Today, we have Glenn McGovern with us to talk about canine excessive force cases. Glenn practices personal injury and civil rights law. We will put his contact information in the description below, so you can contact him directly after this episode with any questions on this topic. Glenn was also the subject of Papa Don's weekly blog today for a spectacular settlement he reached in a very sad civil rights case involving police excessive force. So make sure to check out the blog for more details on that. The area of civil rights is Glenn's forte. So Glenn, please share with us how you investigate, work up, and try these canine excess force cases.
Okay, thank you very much. There's nothing more pertinent to what's going on is canine excessive force cases. It's a situation where it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And I'll talk about some of the reasons for doing that. The other thing that you want to think about police canine cases is that these are deadly weapons. These dogs can kill. And there's been a lot of problems with certification, lack of standards. And I've got a little presentation. I'm going to hit this outline. Let's see, how do I get this? And go through this with you all. So canine cases are classic systems failures. And and the way we try these is to show the various failures in the system. They're great system cases. You know, it starts with who is responsible for selection of a defective canine. Is it defective training? There usually is, of the officer handler, defective testing of the dog, defective certification, lack of implemented policies. It creates anger in the public when they find this out, and we've focus group this and try these cases because most people don't know what's going on. And when you when you try these cases, when you do a system failure, it takes the blame off the dog and the officer handler and puts it on the department under Monell. And I'll talk about that a little bit, but people love dogs. And so, you don't want to go out and attacking the dog, but we've tried that. Anyway, police, to handle these cases is a lot of work. You got to know everything about canines, and you should know more than the department and the officers about canines, because most of them don't know a lot. The standards, here's the problem. The standards are not uniform. And I'll show you a list of, alphabet group of groups that have standards. The certification isn't uniform for the officers and the dogs. The background and acquisition information, they're buying these dogs, bringing them in from Europe in bulk. You got to follow the money. And they're not returning any of these dogs to Europe when they come back, even though they're defective dogs. The pre-training testing of the canine in the records, the departments aren't getting these. The trainers, training of the officer and handler records, we see conflicts between the people that are importing, the people that are bringing them in and training the department and selling them the dog, and they're not testing the dog. Not all dogs make good police dogs. The credential and history of the breeder, dealer, and trainer, you want to know that. The maintenance records of the canine unit, most of them don't have good maintenance records, and we'll talk about maintenance. And the bite ratio, how often when they take a dog out the car, does it bite somebody? That's important. Let me put it this way. What if I tell you I've invented a new weapon for police to use to fight crime? It may go off without warning and kill citizens. You may not be able to shut it off 30 or 40% of the time. It will take you 4 attempts maybe to shut it off while it harms others. It will only harm or kill Black people 90% of the time. It will be used on misdemeanor offenders. It'll be used on juveniles, and here's an example of what's going on. And notice the officer has no control over this dog.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Hey, watch crossfire. Come over here. Get on the ground, face down.
Now, what's happening here, and unfortunately, this is not uncommon, but most police departments' response is, we need these to fight crime and protect our officers. Ironically, one of the most dangerous positions in police work is being an officer with a dog, tracking with a dog. But the protection is really not there. There are some duties that canines can do better and save officers, minimize risk. But there's risk in using these dogs that the departments don't recognize. Example, spontaneous bite at the end of a track. These dogs, I'll talk about it, they're multi-purpose dogs. They may use them for drugs, explosions, tracking. Most departments train these, and we've had cases like this where they're tracking. They don't know if it's a kid or a railroad worker or a citizen in there, or who's in the weeds or in the building, and it's trained to bite at the end, no matter what, which is the danger to everybody in the community. Shows now, in the canine book I cite here by Brad Smith, Canines in the Courtroom, I'll talk about that later, some books that can help educate you, but it shows the handler has little control of the dog. The excess force problems in the US are getting worse. Why? Lack of uniform policies, lack of standards, lack of supervision or training of officers. Usually the head guy that's head of the canine unit is an officer that's kind of burned out. He's been with the department for 20 years and they stuck him in canine. Lack of maintenance training. It's just like your kid or learning a language. You got to work at it every day, yet this is sorely lacking. They're supposed to have 15 hours, the National Police Canine Association, a month. That's totally it doesn't really come close, because what they do is they sell these dogs at very high cost, and they say, look, we're going to sell you a multi-purpose dog. You can use this dog to do drug surveillance and pirate cars and seize cars and make money. So he'll be in crystal meth, marijuana, cocaine. He'll also do tracking. He'll also do criminal apprehension. Now here's the problem. How many hours this dog has to practice all this stuff? And do they have the resources to do that? And then the practice is ridiculous. You got a guy in a bite suit, and he may be good at going after guys with bite suits, but when he's got a real person there, and then some of them use electric shock collars on the dog, and then you put the electric shock collar on the dog isn't stupid. The dog knows he's not going to get punished if he don't release. And the standards allow him to wear these shock collars. It's just crazy. Failure to accurately keep records and bite statistics. Baton Rouge had an over 90% bite ratio. We've had departments, most of them, they don't know what their bite statistics are. So you got to get all the records and go back and compute this. I'm shocked, but they're still using canines on juveniles. It's not prohibited in a lot of jurisdictions. They use 95% of minorities. They're used to make money for the department in traffic stops and the pirate patrol vehicles. And we've seen several cases in several jurisdictions where for traffic stops, they let the dog jump in the car when you've got a driver that's medically impaired and just let him bite the hell out of him until he gets out of the car. The bite ratios of the department, they should be kept. If not, get the bite reports and calculate. 20% is acceptable, 30% or higher is questionable, over 40% unacceptable. Look at the demographics for the age, race, and misdemeanors of the offenses bit by canines. When the mayor of Baton Rouge found out after the Marshall Project, they did a study on this, he told the police department, stop using canines, for property damage, for misdemeanors, for kids, because that's what they were doing. Here's typical what you see In a department, okay, we got 66% 1 year, 64%, 20%, 50%, 100%. They should know something's wrong. It creates your Manel liability that they knew about this. Certification, follow the money, profit motive. You pay your fees when you get certified. I think I was told I was the only attorney to take the deposition, the 30B6 of the National Police Canine Association. I Googled them and I said, they don't have a building. And then I took the deposition, and the lady, I asked for the records, the test records in a particular case. They don't have them. They don't have any test records. Then and she explained to me, she's in an apartment, she's got a stamp, she stamps the certificates, a certification that they give her after they do the testing, but there's no records of the testing. The department is supposed to have, and they say, we give these to the police department. I've yet to find a police department that has the records. Conflicts, the dog breeders, suppliers, these dogs come in groups of 20. They'll get them cheaper if they don't tell them what kind of dogs they want, whether it's a Belgian Malinois or a German Shepherd or a Dutch Shepherd. And they're coming in not certified now. Before they were all certified from Europe. They're getting green dogs, or we've had cases where the dogs flunked everything. The dogs wouldn't bite, and they made them bite. And if you make a dog bite, he's neurotic. But we had I'll show you where you can track the dog and see what's going on. It takes a lot of work. But anyway, testing for certification doesn't reflect the real world. What they're doing now is they're using these Belgian Malinois. The military's been using them. You got to know what you're doing. These young officers cannot handle these dogs. A Belgian Malinois can jump up 8 feet and bite you on the neck. They're very fast dogs. And what they do, and typically they chain them all down, and they have a guy in a bite suit walk in between and get them all riled up and everything. And there's some, and the officers cannot handle these dogs, as you saw in that photo, that video that I showed. The testing, the military has extensive training. They go on for months. But what do we have for National Police Canine Association in most states? 120 hours with 13 other people in the class, with 13 dogs, with one assistant in a bite suit that's not certified, not trained, because there is no certification. It's ridiculous. If you fail, you just do it again and pass. All the training for the real world is forgotten. It's all training to get, just the maintenance and the training is to get certified at the end of the year. Foreign dogs are purchased, for discounts, but the quality of the dogs is worse. I know one trainer told me one police department, they were taking in dogs or getting dogs, and they were getting better dogs than they were importing dogs and everything from, because they've got defectives. I've never seen or taken a deposition where the breeder or the trainer has said, we get X amount of dogs. How many dogs did you return? How many dogs did you fail? None. Okay. Police department has a custom practice of deploying poorly trained dogs and handlers. What we've seen now is, follow the money, look at the purchase orders. They're buying dogs that aren't certified. Standards, you can find the standards, the rules are everywhere. Here's the National Police Canine Association. That's the website address, and they've got all the rules. But you've got obedience, deployment, criminal apprehension, courage tests. You can use an e-collar, and these standards are ridiculous. It's supposed to control the dog in the building, control the dog at all times. And then the warnings here, when you search the area, the canines to be released, you're supposed to give a warning before sending the dog in. And this is frequently not done. And you got to watch this. If they do it, that may be a problem with comparative negligence or contributory negligence. The handler under the National Police Canine Association, you have to give 2 verbal warnings loud enough. And, going along, it may be conducted on leash or off leash. This is interesting, and this is a problem. once the canine has engaged the decoy, the standards to pass, he's got 45 seconds to get the dog off. The person could bleed out by then, and you get 4 commands. It's this. So anyway, and they give them, chances, for mistaken rebites. They still don't fail for that. These standards are antiquated. Here's the problem. All these groups have standards. Which one's the right standard and everything? So that's the problem. We need a national standard for all dogs. And then police departments don't do sufficient maintenance training. You've got them multi-purpose for cocaine, marijuana, meth, tracking. Well, you got to do this every month. You got to do this every week. And what do the departments do? They give them 1 to 1.5 hours extra pay a week. That's it, to maintain this dog and everything. And you got to keep the dog close to you. You can't keep him in a kennel and just come visit, because he has to bond with the dog. But check the records, because they're probably not there for the canine and the officers. And then the other thing, I've yet to see a department that had a syllabus for their training with what's their goals. What are their testing goals met? What are they going to do to change that? What are they going to do to stop them from releasing? And like I said, it's a system failure. And you look at their policies, and this is where I really get upset what's going on. The rule, do they have a rule protecting them from misdemeanor offenses, protecting citizens from juvenile offenses, limiting the duration of the bite? In deposition, I've asked people, how long do you leave the dog until he comes out of there dragging the dog? I said, wait a minute, has anybody taught you this? He's under a bed. You make your 3 announcements. I'm from the police department, so-and-so. I got a dog. I'm going to send the dog in if you don't come out. You send the dog in for 5 seconds, pull the dog out, say, I'm going to send the dog back in if you don't release him. If he doesn't come out, you do it again. Anybody? No, I never taught that. We just put the dog on him and just let him go. He has to come out of there. That's ridiculous. Here's the other thing. Your cases, they'll charge him with resisting arrest. Because what they do with these dogs, they're certified as officers. So if they beat them on the nose or something, they'll charge them with attacking an officer or battery on an officer. And but passive resistance is not resistance. When a dog's chumping down on you with 700 to 1200 psi pound of bite, and then here's my big thing on the continuum of force. Continuum of force is levels of forces, and like, I'll give you an example how important this is. In New Orleans, we're under a federal consent. They had problems with their canines and bites. It was terrible, one of the worst departments ever. So what they did is they put it's number 1 with deadly force, they put canines there. Guess how many incidents they had after they implemented that policy, trained the officers? Zero after making that one change. Most departments do not have them listed anywhere. There's safety rules for enforcement of canines, and you want to come up with your safety rules and work with focus groups. I like to pull them out, and these are all pulled out of policies and everything that are actually implemented either from the standards or the police department. And there is a set of model standards that I'll show you. But, and they're very basic, and what you have to do at the beginning, first deposition, get them to admit to these standards, and they're going to have to. I like to show them, flash them up, and then what's the officer? It's in black and white. What's he going to do? Say no? So if he says no, then he's not trained. And then these are the rules. And we file motions to be able to have our rule board on these and use these rules, and we call them national standards of law enforcement, and get it in all the time with very conservative judges. What you need to know and find out. One thing I've learned from Don is the harder I work, the luckier I get. In these cases, you got to work them. I've had experts I've worked with say, boy, you do so much more than everybody else. You really, nobody's ever done this or that. I never thought of that. But handle the police officer training, you got to get those records. After 9/11, there was a big demand for security guard dogs. And so there was a shortage. And so they were everybody's jumping in the puppy farm business and getting these dogs and breeding them in here. The Chinese are selling Belgian Malinois now. So the dogs are not certified and they're coming in here. The dealers like Belgium and Czechoslovakia, they have clubs and they train the dogs and train them to police departments. But here you got dealers bringing these over. Maybe there's a middleman bringing them over and they don't have the paperwork. And the departments are buying these dogs without the paperwork. And then the dog gets hip dysplasia or whatever, and the taxpayers are out $16,000. The screening of the dogs, they bring them typically to a dealer that has a connection to the department, and there's no records. So the dog sits, heals. Great, we're keeping the dog. And that's ridiculous. They're buying green dogs and they're putting green dogs with green officers. That's a recipe for disaster. They're not getting the purchase documentation. I've seen them where they've got the documentation in a foreign language where you can use Google Translate and pop it in there. And it says, I'm giving this dog back. I want my money back because this dog, it doesn't do this or doesn't do that. And they've got it, but they didn't look at it. Check the chip numbers. We've had them where chip numbers don't match. So there's a lot of hanky-panky going on. Discussing the deposition, I did the deposition of the National Police Canine Association. And this is basically, it's like some of these schools, you pay your fees and get your B's, it's a joke. And the test records and there's conflicts. So here's a typical certificate from the National Police Canine Association, 120 hours. They'll have 13 people in the course, one trainer, and they'll do this in 2 weeks. So how is that dog trained? It's just not sufficient. And this dog is certified in multiple tasks. It's impossible. The training records, the officers should get paid for maintenance. Its minimum standards are 16 hours a month. But what if it's a dual purpose dog? And that's what they sell these people because they make money on drug apprehensions and everything and drug searches and seize cars and airplanes. So, how many months of training do you need for criminal apprehension, bite training? And what we see is they're not giving all the training. They're concentrating on just getting the dog recertified. NCPA, National Police Canine Association, recommends 16 hours a month. That's ridiculous. When you learn a new language, you got to practice every day. When you learn a new instrument, you got to practice every day. Canine dogs need regular reinforcement. All the literature says that they need repetition to maintain skills. And like I said, they don't pay the officers to do the maintenance training, which is extremely important. The breed records, registration, country and origin, purchase records, veterinary records, certification, and the chip numbers. These are all things you look for. Here's what's going on. This is the most popular breed, the Belgian Malinois, popular with military and police. Very fast dog, very, very light dog, high jumper, and everything, but very aggressive, very hard to chain. If you hate someone really bad, give them a Belgian Malinois puppy because they're very, very tough dogs to handle. And the military, they have extensive training. They can handle them, but not these civilian police officers. German Shepherd is the other one. It weighs a little more. They got a hip dysplasia problem. And because they're not getting all the records, the vet records, the testing records on these dogs, they're not getting their money's worth out of these dogs. It's not as fast as the Belgian Malinois and the Dutch Shepherd. And then they got the Dutch Shepherd. It's very good for tracking. It's similar. It's becoming more popular. Labrador retrievers are used primarily for drugs. They excel in hunting and explosives. Here's the website. It's kind of small, workingdog.com. And what I've done with my dogs, when you take the deposition of the officers, they love this. You get the whole background and who's certified, who's not certified in the family, and you go through it. And then the question begs itself, well, why isn't this dog certified? What happened and everything here when all his siblings in the litter are certified? And what certifications do they have? And this dog has none of this. Do a background check on the canine, do a background check on the officer. You've got to do the same thing. Does it have the NVAP certification like Belgium? Department should have this. We've seen it where they agreed to purchase that in their specs and they don't get it. They buy another dog because of I think the relationship between the trainer that they use. Was it a reject canine? If a dog is forced to bite, there's 5 stages of training. There's play, and then there's prey, and then apprehension. And if the dog doesn't want to bite and you pushing it to go to the criminal apprehension state, it's going to be neurotic. And we've seen that happen. And then you see in the dog's records where he bites other officers, he bites other people and everything. Follow the money on all of this. The purchase order, specifications, check the other bids. We've seen, funny business with that, where they've got certified dogs and they buy uncertified dogs for reason for, more money. Check who tests the dogs before purchase, test records before the purchase. There's usually don't have any. Check all the same records. Is it 13 people in a class? So how can they have 120 hours of training in 2 weeks? They can't. The fences, let's talk about the fences. These are very difficult cases to try and win. You have to really, be careful, do your focus groups and plan. Resisting arrest, warnings were given and ignored. Defendants will claim there were adequate warnings, and that if they're smart, they'll video or document that the warnings are made. It'll be on body cams or something, or they'll announce in a PA, if it's in a field, they have to announce it from blank police department, announce that they have a canine dog, announce that they're going to release the dog to bite if the citizen doesn't come out. They have to do that and everything. And they should do that. National Police Canine says 2 times, most departments 3 times. The courts generally require you to give a canine announcement before deploying the dog. Got the cases there. And then, what you can do is go through deposition and everything and go, if you got the body cam with the time code on it, and you can, show when he made an announcement, what time, what location, and do this. And like, this person's bid here, there's no way 2,000 feet away they could hear that. Defenses of comparative negligence in canine cases. Citizen is arrested, he hits the dog, or he's withering or running, not coming out. That's a defense that they're going to bring up. And you have to bring up the standards in depositions that withering, of course, when you got, 800 pounds of force tearing your leg apart, that you're going to wither. The citizen did not come out of announcement. There was a case in LA where a guy lost his testicles. The dog took his testicles off, and he lost that case because the police had documented very well. They even brought in a airplane to make announcements. Come out, we're going to send the dog out. This is the LA Police Department. They didn't do that. This guy lost his jewels, and it was a 0 verdict. Citizens on drugs, check the medical records of your citizens. There was a Montana case, crystal meth user, lady was chewed up. They couldn't get the dog off of her. They lost that case. Now, the presentation of these cases, you got to be careful the way you present them. I suspect maybe these weren't presented properly, and they relied on, oh, this is a terrible thing to our plaintiff. You should feel sorry. That don't work anymore because there is no sympathy. So it's not about your client and everything. But consider I think there was case presentation problems in a lot of those cases, and they weren't aware of that. They are models and procedures. Most departments' policies are paper policies. They're not implemented. I call them paper policies. They're not trained, or maybe, they're not discussed, or they'll say, oh, we meet, the canine unit meets on Monday for 3 hours, and that's our maintenance training, or 4 hours. And we do this, 4 times a month. So that's 16 hours. And okay, where is your documentation? What did you work on? Where did you work on it? You don't have a facility. They don't have any of this. They're not listed on the continuum of force. And dogs, they've had people faces taken off and die. They've had people hit a gun in Alabama, bit on the groin under a bed. just left the dog on him, didn't give him aftercare, and he bled out. So these are fatal. And you saw that picture, you noticed he went after the guy's neck and everything. So you can hit a major artery and then you bleed out, plus get infection. Canines are not listed in the continuum of force in most departments. A lot of departments, a lot of police experts tell me that they're getting away from continuum of force and saying, here we do, talking to the person, and then we do, basic hand holds, and then we go to pepper spray, tasers, and then we go to, deadly force. They're not doing that anymore because they've been losing cases when they show the continuum of force, and you show your checklists and everything to plaintiff fraternities. So they're getting away from that now. But if they've got it, and what's worse, they'll have a continuum of force and they don't tell the officers where they are. But these are not pets. These are not, things that are safe, and if it's not trained, if you've got a neurotic dog, it can be, very, very dangerous. And I talked about New Orleans, what they did, that one change in their paper and how that made everything. They listed canines as deadly force. I think that's probably the only department I know of that's ever done that. My experts tell me that they were kind of shocked they did that because, but they mostly agree, yeah, they are deadly force. Let's see something. In New Orleans Police Department, it's terrible. It's still under consent judgment. The standards are all there. Here's the International Association of Police Chiefs standards about training, and it lays it all out for you very, very simply. Here's something that I've yet to see an officer know about this. These are the standards that a struggle alone won't preclude the release of this canine. What they come out as a defense is that we had to leave the dog on him to put the handcuffs. We had to leave the dog on him because we didn't have full control and the person was resisting. So we left the dog on him, and okay, they lost 3 pounds of flesh, but that's just the way it goes. And with a straight face. And but the policy requires where it's permitted to bite, the handler has to call off the dog at the first possible moment. And this gets into a little technical, like immunity. We had a case recently where they had client was shot at 82 times. And then, you have to look at maybe the first 1 shot or 2 shots or even 5 shots, but the other shots, you have to analyze whether they get immunity for that. Well, it's the same thing with a dog. If you leave the dog on for 5 seconds is one thing, but 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, they lose that immunity. And immunity is a big problem. But this is from DOJ. Now, here's the other thing you got to watch, and they'll use this. Some of the police departments have baseball cards with their canine and the officer. They're very popular in the public, and they put demos. We had one case where a department was showing off its canines at a high school football game. I should have put the video in here, and it attacked the mascot. It took this giant chicken down, everything. And but so I don't know. But the get to demonstrative events, because sometimes you get things like that, but you show the control and the way, hopefully the way it's supposed to be done. I once tried naming the canine dog as a defendant in a federal lawsuit since he's a commissioned officer. So, and that didn't work. But anyway,
Did you find that was like a heartstring issue where people were like, hey, this dog, doesn't have intent or that kind of thing?
People love dogs, generally they love dogs. And when they get killed in a line of duty, they'll have contributions coming in. And one of the cases we had, they gave him a hero's cremation and ceremony with all the cars, and right before I wanted to look at the dog.
Oh no!
Request for reduction, and then I had to take the deposition. And Peyton was telling me, she says, "What are you gonna do? He just lost his dog. What are you gonna do?" And so I handled it. It worked out.
Do you get like a spoliation instruction on that? They destroyed the evidence or anything?
Right. That was pending. Yeah. But this dog, the chip didn't match, and they said it was some disease, but they didn't have any vet records to show that. Yeah, dogs are commissioned officers usually. They've got their own little police ID. You know, it can be a felony to attack a canine. We have that in Louisiana. Minimum mandatory jail time. It's something. They use these dogs for public relations, and sometimes they raise money. So this is from this canine book. This guy's has some experience, Tony Smith. Some people care more about the police dogs than the canine officer. This is how bad it's got. And I was shocked to see this occurring. This is called a breaker bar. And it's got a little tab, you take it out, and when the dog won't release, you gag the dog. There's a method to get the dog off, but they don't know how to get the dog off. One of the things you do is take it by the collar, put your hands under there, shove the dog's nose in the person so he can't breathe, and he'll release. And then the other thing that's a heads up is when they're using like 3 choke collars with these painful collars on top of that, because they can't control the dog. But these are being used and adopted after usually, they get sued and they have to pay judgments. The citizens, one thing, in settlement talks, we talk about who cares about these cases, making them important and how it affects everybody in the community. And it really does, because these dogs frequently go astray and attack innocent citizens and everything. Other law enforcement officers, the anger, the emotional value on these cases is off the chart. I know we did one and it was a 30. And we did this with a national group, and they made us do it again. They said, you did something wrong. I said, fine, give us another vote. We did it again, 30. And that's not uncommon on a scale of 1 to 10. But they're worried about these, they'll usually require extensive confidentiality agreements and that sort of thing, which we don't do. But anyway, emotional cases produce record judgments. There's no doubt in my mind about that. You got to focus group your case early. You got to do it at intake because of all the moving parts and everything in there and things that get there. Get all the body cams and, it's just amazing. And the chit chat among officers afterwards and everything. Sometimes you get lucky and everything. You do focus groups as the case progresses, and then you can use those headshots in mediation. The code for police officers is still very negative, but for dogs, they love the dogs and everything. So that's what you got to be aware of. Demonstrative aids are very important. You have to be a teacher and you use a dog skull to demo the force of these dogs. Some of these dogs, they can actually puncture metal and everything with their teeth. That they're bred to bite and hold, and have this high pressure. And so a dog skull shows that the way that's worked. Google Maps of the site where warnings were made or not made, a rule board with your rules of law enforcement, file a motion beforehand to allow them to use that. In Louisiana, we've been very successful using safety rules. And sometimes the judges, we got to tweak them, say national standards of law enforcement, but basically safety rules, we've won in federal and court doing that. Blow up those acquisition records, especially if you've got a smoking gun document, like the dog was returned that was defective. The canine training records, do your timelines or do something to show the lack of training, the officer handling, have blow-ups of those records or whatever. Other incidents and bite statistics I'm constantly falling on the floor after I get a new request for production of people. One department, they had multiple cases and no one's ever reprimanded. They don't do anything to the dog. They don't retrain the dog. They don't retrain the officer, and they're letting cars, it's scary for traffic offenses, jump in the car and just chew until the person gets out of there. Or on the ground, they're biting an innocent bystander or biting another officer. They do that frequently. Or, they're using dogs, they can't get them under control and they're damaging the person. And I've never seen anybody reprimanded yet for any of this. So site visit they're supposed to do a report and an analysis on each case, and then do a site visit to the dog, because like some of these dogs that are defectively aggressive, they are overprotective, they're defectively aggressive. Photos of the client's injury, photos from the department, and if you got a dog like that he can't control, subpoena that dog for court, and have them bring that court in with the muzzle and that dog's, growling at the judge and everybody. And that's their worst nightmare. I've yet to get to that point, because they usually back down. Photo from the hospital. I'll show you one that was from the hospital. They're supposed to take pictures of everybody. Police cruiser cam, helicopter cams, the radio calls. There's one here. A couple of pounds was taken. This is like an over a 2-minute bite. You want to do your focus groups in all these cases. Let's see something. Yeah, I'm missing one slide here. Here we go. Let me wait for 1 second.
Definitely, hands down.
Yeah, there we go.
The police department is very much at fault, but I do believe the handler as well played a role as far as maybe trying, being better trained with the dog, and maybe trying to somehow avoid further action in the attack with the dog.
So they get it. Bubba gets it about supervision and training. There's a lot to this and everything. There's a couple of books that'll get you going. This is a good book, Canines in the Courtroom by Brad Smith. This is a good basic bite work. We've bred dogs for hundreds of years, domesticated them, and they don't want to bite. So you got to train them to bite and everything. But this shows you how it's supposed to be done, and it's not usually done this way. And also screening the dogs. He has a good section in there. What's a good dog? What's a bad dog? This is like the Bible of protection dog training. The Shih Tzu method, which is commonly used. The other thing is most of these dogs, they only understand Dutch or German, and so that's where the dog comes from usually, and then they don't want to change the language to confuse the dog, and then there's a belief that the criminals could say sit or stay or something and the dog not obey, but I don't know about that. Canine for tactical operations, that's a whole different ball game, getting a dog used to and efficient at doing that. This is a book that's interesting. This is by Tony Smith. He's an old trainer in Arkansas, and it's kind of a promotion thing, but it gives you a list of what you should get for your money. When you buy a dog, what training needs to be done, how he does the training, and how it should be done. So anyway, I hope that helps. It's kind of got limited time to get all this in, and I don't want to say everything because this is going on YouTube. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
it's on YouTube. So but if you got any further questions or need any other information, but it's just fascinating. This problem is not getting better. It's actually getting worse, and it's sad. It's sad.
So, we have one question from the audience, and then I have quite a few questions as well that I was thinking about as I was listening. We got about 10, 15 more minutes we can chat. Okay. Dennis Phillips asks, are these 1983 cases?
Yes, we make all ours 1983 cases. I want to go, in federal court. That's where we get our biggest judgments. And also, like City of New Orleans, for example, they don't have any insurance. Some of these municipalities don't have insurance. So, I got to get my judgment and say, hey, I'm seizing your armory tomorrow if you don't pay me. So, or I'm seizing the police chief's desk and his cars. So get the marshals out there. And so they're 1983. You have to pick and choose your cases. Can you beat the immunity? And is it excessive force? And also the way I think you got to win this is show that the department is at fault, which is a steep, very few successful Monell cases, but it can be done. It can be done and everything. So But yeah, definitely that's the, I don't want to go in state court. I don't want to get a home cooked meal too.
That's true. That's
And
really
I'd like to get attorney's fees. So, so I can be as successful as Jenna,
yeah. That's what we all want, right?
That's right.
So, when you're dealing with a qualified immunity issue, what things should we look for in potential cases that could help us defeat that qualified immunity issue?
Well, they excessive force that they let the dog on. What's the duration of the bite? What is the offense and why they're using the dog? And is the dog under control and not under control? Is the officer, over the top and not under control or doing improper procedures? And then what's their training? What's their bite ratio? So, failure to supervise, failure to screen, same thing, but you got to do it for the dog too. Nobody does it for the dog. Okay. And we spent, and my wife's, from Europe. So, we had contacts over there. And so, and it's kind of a secret thing, they don't want to talk and everything. It's hard to get information, but you can do it. You just got to dig. But like I said, there's websites and the dogs and the good breeders, like in the Netherlands, they're all listed on there and everything. And they've got their whole, you can punch in the dog's name and everything once you get the registration papers and go backwards and see, what's going on with that dog. And then the main thing is the dog certified? Why do you spend $16,000, $20,000 on a dog that's not certified? I don't get it.
Yeah, what are you paying for at that point?
I was doing one years ago. The first one I did, they put the dog on a guy on the West Bank that they handcuffed for a domestic dispute, and then they let the dog chew his shoulder. And that's what got me into this, because I've never seen a bite like that. It was a Belgian Malinois. I didn't even know they were using Belgian Malinois. This was a long time ago. And it looked like somebody took your carving knife and cut 6 inches and about 4 inches deep all around his shoulder. And while handcuffed, they did this. So, that's clearly excessive force. The withering thing, those things you've got to look for. You got to be careful. And then you got to watch the defenses, because most of these cases, the win ratio is not real good in them. But, people like Jenna can just get record judgments on this thing with all the knowledge that she's got up here,
Yep, the stuff. So do you find that certain defenses resonate more with your focus groups? Like when you go in and
oh yeah. Well, I hit the ones that resonate that you got to watch out for, and people lose, that the person deserved it. They didn't obey the police officer. They ran. There's several things that you got to watch out for. Their drug use. If you're parading, you're trying to get sympathy for your plaintiff, it's just not going to work. But like I said, you can get around those, but you still got the specter of comparative negligence. If they say, it's negative attribution, I wouldn't have done this. This wouldn't have happened to me, or whatever. So it depends. I mean, if it's an innocent citizen, but they had one in Shreveport where an innocent citizen, a little girl, got bit by the dog when he released the dog, and it went after the wrong person, and he couldn't call it off. And they got a bad on liability. They held that the officer and the dog wasn't at fault. So go figure. Yeah, they're not easy. And like I said, a lot of people go after the dog, just going after the dog. But what we do is, it's not the dog, it's who purchased the dog, who trained the dog. And then you got to be careful too, still with the negative concept of policemen, in the United States. Still, you got to be careful when you're attacking that officer and everything. You've got to be careful doing that. But I find it's very powerful to be able to tell a jury, look, this is terrible. This dog did this. This officer did this. But, it's not all their fault. It's the department's fault, and then you're going to collect on that judgment too. They may let that officer go out there. Another good way, test your jury interrogatories, because you're going to have a lot of blanks on there, and the way they fill them out and everything, and especially we've had them lately, judges say, hey, it's just, we do a preemptive attack on immunity. We file to declare there is no immunity beforehand. And that's always a kind of a shocker to them and everything, the judges, but it gives, I want them to have plenty of time to analyze everything. And, you want to do that and everything. I think people don't file enough motions and give judges enough time. And they say, well, I'm holding this back. I'm surprised. No, I used to do that. No, it doesn't work. And,
judges don't like that.
No, I just wrote an article about file your MILs early, and everything, and give the judge a break. And I got 3 or 4 phone calls from judges saying, yeah, that's right.
Let them sleep on it for a good week.
We can't do this. Right. They haven't looked at this. I mean, how many dog bite cases have they handled and everything? Yeah. But so, that focus group it. You just don't know the way it's going to go down. There are ways to lose these cases. And I guess the overall bat ratio is probably 50%, if you look at all the cases, which is shocking to me, because most of the cases brought are terrible cases, but the quality of the dogs, the training, it has just gone down the tube. I because of all these, I didn't understand. Now I do. It's all about the money and what's going on and everything in here.
Do you think I know that several police departments or cities have pulled funding from the police departments in response to various, outcries of injustice and things like that. Do you think that could negatively affect this obvious? I mean, to me, it's an obvious lack of resources, lack of training, bad decisions, trying to buy a dog that's not certified. All these things are kind of money related, as you said. I mean, how does that impact when you're having less money funneled into the department?
Well, I think, the defunding thing, is a mistake. It's left, like you said, it's given them something else to hang their hat on, another excuse, another defense that, well, they don't have the money to do this.
We can't do better because we don't have the money.
Yeah. And actually, but here's the thing. I don't believe that that's the way to go. In Louisiana, a reserve officer needs no training. He just has to qualify with a gun, and that's not required. A certified police officer needs 360 hours or 370 hours of training. My wife's hairdresser needs 1,500 hours of training. My plumber needs 8,000 hours of training. So how can you learn tasers, ASP, all of these new devices we've got that are constantly coming along with a police officer? Now, in Europe, whole different ball game. Now they got national police forces, but still they could do that here. And I've tried to talk to the sheriffs, about doing this, and they don't want to cooperate. I mean, the worst thing, we ought to get rid of all the sheriffs. We have sheriffs and we have police departments.
We do too in Washington.
They're so political, and they're very strong. And they, like feudal times, they collect the money and everything, and they're usually inept. But not always, but they don't have, I talked to them and I said, let's do the European model. Go 2.5 years. You pay them like an accountant, or whatever. They're screened, you really screen them, and they know everything. They know every part of police, SWAT team, and they got some, they got professional criminals in Europe. They got all these ex-Bosnian guys and, KGP and all this stuff. They go in the bank and they're out there in 20 minutes. So they steal your car. One of Erica's friends got their car stolen. They rolled it onto a truck and took it apart and then got across the border. And then when they filed an insurance claim, they said, you don't have a claim. You got the car back. It's just in pieces. But, their insurance system's different. But they're very professional, and they don't shoot anybody. I mean, they'll have 5 or 6 people a year. Here, it's terrible and everything, the amount of people that they shoot. But and here's the other thing. When you give them that training, they're professionals. They have pride. People respect them. People do not respect them here. I can tell you, in focus groups, the local police departments are at the bottom of and they don't even like FBI agents anymore or federal magistrates. So I don't know why. I guess they get nobody reads a newspaper and they get everything on the news or something. So you see one bad agent or one bad magistrate. But the training, I think defunding is a big mistake. That's not the way to go. We need more training. And, like state police have one training facility in New Orleans, and they're like several months. That's what you need. So I said, why don't we get together at UNO, New Orleans or Baton Rouge? They have facilities there. I mean, how do you train them to drive a car? Half the officers get killed in cars. They don't know how to drive. Okay, now they got
because they got to look at their computer and they're like distracted by where they're going.
Well, that's another. We've had some of those too, where they got distracted driving. They run over a client, because they're fooling with the computer and there's other devices. But they don't have that. So have one facility. Everybody kicks in. You're going to cut your costs. You're going to have a common curriculum. You have excellent people training. There's consistency, and you can retrain periodically. And right now, that's not being done, and none of them want to get together with them and everything to do that. But they don't know the basics. They don't know the basics, and the officers are getting killed because of this. They don't know how to do a traffic stop. That's like they don't know how to handle domestic disputes, and they get shot. So it's a mess. And then say, well, it's going to cost money. Well, how much money they paying me? When I get these suits.
Well, that was my next question. Is we bring these lawsuits to try to make the community safer and to create change. How do you see that, or do you see that working here, where you're bringing awareness to really real problem? That's
an excellent point. And here's the problem. When the police department usually isn't paying the judgment, the municipality's paying the judgment. So where's the deterrent? Where's the deterrent there? That's the problem. That's the problem. And then a lot of people have immunity. You can't seize any property, whatever. You can't sue, like in Mississippi. One of my clients got killed in jail. You can't sue a prison in Mississippi and everything. So they came in there and beat him. Killed him. Then they killed the ringleader that killed him the same night. I got video and everything, but I gotta be creative. Can't sue them. So you got immunity that you've got to worry about, and it's rough. I mean, I'm in the Fifth Circuit. That's about the worst circuit court of appeal you could be in and everything. So it's very difficult, but it can be done. I mean, I love doing it. My whole team. That's what we do. And when Trump got in there, they were all crying, oh, the chicken little, sky's falling. What are we going to do? We're not going to be able to do a civil rights. I said, let me tell you something. There's never, because I do the focus groups, there's never a better time to be a civil rights attorney, because everybody's got rights on their mind. First Amendment, Second Amendment, it's all on, and you got to work the case out. I like federal court because I tell them, I got two hats. I'm a 1983 attorney, and tell them the history of that. Why Congress said, we can't handle this, after Selma and all that. And that guy was on TV, and Walter Cronkite, and they put the dog on him, and they beating him with a 2x4. And they said, we got to do something. They passed that. And they said, we'll make you private attorney generals, and then you get compensated. And so I said, I got two hats, this is what I'm, and then, you empower them and say, thank God, I'm not in, Mamu, I'm getting a home cooked gumbo meal, I'm here, and I got this judge who's probably trying to kick me out, right? So
yeah, but doesn't even
this jury, and you decide what you want for your community, and you empower them and everything. And, and so, but I got, I think it was $600,000 judgment in a First Amendment case in Monroe, which they don't even get 100,000 for a disc case over there and everything. But they were all very conservative. They were all NRA members. So I said, you decide what you want in the community. If all the sheriffs are watching,
those are the best.
They're going to come. I memorized where all the towns were, Eros and West Baton Rouge and all. I said, they're going to come in your community, violate your First Amendment rights. And what's next? Second Amendment rights. And you could see their body language. Yes. And then, they all had Confederate flags, and my paralegal had told me, who was African-American, Glenn, they all got Confederate flags up here. What are you going to do? I said, this is good. We use this in clothing. And she said, no way. So, and then I told them, and the next thing they'll tell you what kind of flag to put on your lawn. And so we got a record judgment on that. But, we did 13 focus groups in that cases, and they were all within the same narrow range.
Yeah.
And, when you do it right. But I don't know. I had to change like we had to retrain ourselves how to do all of this. And it's a constant change. And, you can't give up. There's a way out and everything, but it's really gratifying. It's really gratifying and everything. I enjoy
creative,
it.
Work hard, just like Glenn said, work it harder than anybody. Not only is that going to prepare you better, it's going to make defense really worried, right? Because they're like, whoa, normally someone just kind of comes in, does the same old, and whatever. This person's different. Maybe they want to settle with you because you're different. You're scaring them. Maybe, it's just, you're going to do so much better, and be really creative in your arguments, and, don't take no for an answer. Well, you can't do that. Let's figure out a way that I can do it, right?
Yes. I mean, there's, you got to keep trying, and everything and doing that. But I love doing things, that no one else has done, like one of my exhibits, I'll show you here, that I had on the city case with the 83 rounds. I put it in a tube because my daughter's a cognitive scientist. And my argument was going to be, look, they got this shot hit here, this shot hit there, this kidney, that kidney, this liver. Now you decide if the other 75 shots were excessive. What are you going to do? So, but we, I know we had focus group that, and they said, that's ridiculous.
Was it powerful?
Oh yeah. It was ridiculous. But the science, if you're doing something like that, I had them in a bowl. It didn't work. Couldn't figure that out. And then I talked to my daughter, who's Dr. Kidd, who's a cognitive science at Berkeley. She says, if you have 2 glasses of water, one's bigger than the other with the same amount of water, their glass, they'll always pick the taller glass. So put it in a tube. And we tried it. That worked like a charm.
Oh, that's awesome.
Little things like that, and you got to keep it simple. You got to keep it simple. She did this, the Goldilocks principle. If you put too little information, you bore them, goes up. You put too much information, you confuse them, or you turn them off. So it's got to be just like Goldilocks. The porridge has got to be just right. And it's the same thing. So
and you find that out through your focus group. So everybody, focus group.
It's all. I just did 2 last night. I did 2 the day before that. I mean, we do at least once a week and everything, and they teach me.
They do. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. Oh, one final question. Can people reach out to you and ask for that PowerPoint? It seemed like there was a lot of really good information.
Yes, sure. If they want, or if they need any, I didn't put everything in here, and everything. So I found out it's on YouTube. I don't want to give everything out. So
that's good. It's awesome, because everybody, you got to feel free to reach out to our speakers. They're so kind and generous with their time for joining us here, as well as, answering questions, and they're more than happy to do that. So unless you're a defense lawyer, sorry about that. But
we don't do that. But I've been doing this 45 years, and all my friends are dropping like flies. I went to my high school reunion, only had a couple of us left. And so it makes you think. So I'm thinking, like, how is this giving back to the community? How are people, who can I help? We got 5 lawyers have gone to law school that work for me. I'm very proud of them and done very well. So that's what's important, I think, at this point in my life. So if anybody I can help, as long as you're not a black hat,
Yep. No black hats allowed. All right. Thanks, Glenn. And thank you to all of you who joined us live for this week's episode of Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. If you like today's episode, please click that thumbs up and feed that YouTube algorithm that I mentioned last week. If you want to hear more, if you want these videos to be out there, if you want to help your fellow colleagues, click that thumbs up, subscribe, hit the alert icon, and join us every week. Next week, we'll have Ronald Brodkin, who is a chiropractor from Boca Raton, Florida, who uses a special kind of digital motion X-ray technology to help insurance companies understand his patients' injuries. This was a topic requested by listener Dennis Phillips, and something I had not heard about before he mentioned it. So your topic suggestions are taken very seriously. So don't be afraid to either email me or reach out to the team. Let us know about a topic you want to hear about, or a person you'd like to hear from, and we'll do our best to make it happen. I look forward to learning more about digital motion X-ray from Dr. Brodkin next week with all of you. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.